It's many climbers' wet dream to stand on top of an unclimbed peak, the purest form of exploration. No fixed ropes, no summit photos too intimate, no footsteps to follow, just you and a line that has never been drawn before. A salute to the spirit of adventure, but here's the tension. Recent estimates suggest that 3 to 4% of nature on Earth remains ecologically intact. 3 to 4%. The human footprint is everywhere, which raises an uncomfortable question. Should we leave some mountains unclimbed? There are mountains we already leave alone. Mount Kailash in Tibet, Machu Picchu in Nepal. Sacred, untouched. Not because they are impossible, but because we choose not to climb them. And I find myself wondering what happens when we run out of untouched places. When every square meter on Earth has been walked on, mapped, photographed, uploaded, when every ridge has a route name, every summit a GPS coordinate, does curiosity die? When there is nothing left to discover? Or do we simply redefine what unknown means? In this episode, I sit down with ski guide and explorer Luke Smithwick, a man who has built a life in the narrow space between maps and reality. Together, we explore a question that cuts deeper than first ascents. Should we leave some places alone? My name is Fredrik Sträng, I'm your host. This series explores adventure, science, philosophy, and the questions that live between them. If you like this kind of a content, please subscribe, like, and share. It genuinely helps. I remember when I was 7 years old, sitting in school, tracing the contours of mountains with my fingertips, searching higher and higher. At that time, I didn't know about Everest, but I was already asking the question, what is the highest mountain on Earth? When I reached the number 8848, I stopped. There was nothing higher. I paused, then I panicked. Then I drifted into something else entirely, imagination. What does it feel like to stand there, higher than anything else? Has anyone been there before? And what does it take? My teacher walked up to me and said, almost dismissively, Mount Everest, that's impossible. I didn't believe her, but what stayed with me was not the impossibility, it was the question behind the question. How much of Earth is still unexplored? Admit it, we've all had the thought to go somewhere no one else has been, a waterfall, a hidden beach, a small island, a mountain peak untouched by human presence, a place that feels like the Garden of Eden, unaffected, unclaimed, unseen. But do those places even exist anymore? There is no exact number, but a solid evidence-based estimate is that there are still roughly between 1,000 and 150,000 significant unclimbed mountains in the world. At the same time, there are somewhere between 20 to 100,000 significant peaks globally, depending on how you define a mountain. Which means something important. We have not climbed everything, not even close, but we have climbed enough to start asking a different question. My guest today is someone who lives inside that question. Luke Smithwick has made a name by seeking out the overlooked, the unnamed, the edges of exploration itself, not driven by conquest, but by curiosity, and a relentless need to go where no one else has stood. Luke, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Fredrik. It's great to see you. It's been some years.
It's been some years. You said before we hit record, you became bold, and I'm catching up.
But it's not
Yeah,
it's not the
it's an
years in our life, but the life in our years that counts, doesn't it?
it's an expedition haircut. Absolutely. Yeah. So
I love that. I have so many questions that I want to ask you. You've made a habit of climbing in the Himalayas and also venturing to unclimbed peaks. And back in the days in 2018, when we made an attempt on Kangrishar and we did a new route on Yerka, I talked to you about blank spots, an idea of leaving something behind for the coming generations, not stepping and threading on every single spot on Earth. And the question, what would happen if there is nothing more to be explored? What would happen to our creativity, our productivity, our cultures? And I'd like to just dig into this and ask you bluntly, from a identity and philosophy perspective, if you had to write your own biography, not as a climber, but as an explorer, who is Luke Smithwick?
okay. Gosh, I've never really looked at myself as an explorer. I'm more of a student of life. I think that really what's driven me all along is just continuous learning about my background is archaeology and biology. So I worked in those fields before I started mountain pursuits full time as a mountain guide and as an athlete. And so really that's what keeps me going still is learning new languages, exploring, the interrelationships of wolves and snow leopard and other species in the Himalaya and also now in the Tian Shan. So it's really more to me about what I'm learning along the way than that summit or that ski descent. So
how many true first ascents have you completed? Not that perhaps it's important, but have you lost count?
I'm really not sure. I would say it's probably less than 100. Uh, it really what's driven for me to go to a wild remote area and try an unclimbed peak is more about trying to learn about a particular way of life there or a culture or a particular species in the area. Usually there's something else that brings me into a region before just, rotely looking for something that's unclimbed. So there's usually another interest that pulls me to that part of the range because the range itself, the Himalaya, is 2,500 kilometers long. So it's quite long and orographically fragmented, just like the Rockies here or the Alps there in Scandinavia. So I'm really kind of pulled to different parts of the range for various reasons. So I'm not really sure how many I've climbed, though, that are unclimbed because it's so tricky to sort out. Is the mountain actually unclimbed? You have alpine journals and you have public opinion. And so there's a few things involved with, first ascents for sure.
Speaking which, pulled and unclimbed, figuring out which mountains are unclimbed. What's pulling me right now is that phenomenal photograph behind you. You have to explain where is it taken and what does it display. It's just gorgeous.
It was a moment in 2011 in the Khumbu of northeast Nepal. It's Amadablam, which is a pretty well-known peak throughout the world. And it was just a moment that caught my eye and snapped the shutter with a DSLR. And that's what that peak is. And yeah, special spot. Yeah, I'll go back there this year a couple times, not to Amadablam, but to the region. So,
where did it all start? Was it back in school? You were 7 or 8, looking through the atlas and figuring out which was the highest peak in the world, and then you started asking questions, how it's like to be on that particular spot, who was there first, blah blah blah.
For me, it was Boy Scouts. Actually, that's where I started skiing and started climbing, and from there, just seeing glossy images and magazines from far away of much bigger mountains and bigger terrain. And it really was just a sequence from there, from smaller ranges here into the Rockies, into Alaska for a decade, and then on into the Himalaya. And that's kind of how that happened.
Is there a moment in time where you can pinpoint that exact moment that pulled me in the direction for the rest of your life?
Yes. Yeah. So I grew up on the eastern coast of North America. The mountains are quite old. They used to be the size of the Himalaya. Some of the oldest mountains in the world. They're quite small. They're hills now. They've weathered away. So when I came out to the Rockies here, where I live today, in the American West, I was 12 years old, and we spent a month in the alpine of the Colorado Rockies, and it all made sense. I knew what I was going to do for the rest of my life in terms of finding ways to be near the mountains, around the mountains, and pursue a life in the mountains. And then it's progressed from there.
I can relate to that. I was in school. I was 7 years of age, and I looked through the atlas, and I was grown up in a unassuming part of Sweden where many people go by the saying it's never too late to give up. I did not succumb to that derogative kind of mindset. I actually did revolt.
Clearly.
And I told myself that if people done it in the past, why shouldn't I be able to do it if I replicate their success factors? And I was perhaps not the most courageous person, but I pulled in, a lot of work. And mountains has always been this invisible magnet since then. You mentioned something which I think many people are really curious about. How can we know that no one been there before? How do you, when you explore possible uncharted, unclimbed peaks, what is your strategy? How does the workflow look like?
You're absolutely right. We really can never know if a mountain has been climbed before. I think generally when people climb mountains, they like to leave some sort of record or trace that they were there. Some places have summit logs, or, there's a cairn of rocks, a pile of rocks, or something that lets us know the mountain's been climbed, but you never really actually know. There's phantom climbs, which are climbs that are done without permits. There's people that just don't report their climbs. So you never really know if a mountain is unclimbed. But how I start generally is with alpine journals. In Sweden, you have the Alpine Journal that's reported. You have Japanese. There's the Himalayan Journal in India. There's the Himalayan Database in Nepal, American Alpine Journal. So there is a lot of information out there, but it is selective. So you really have to pour through a lot of text to find information and make sure it wasn't reported in one journal and not in another. So it really, you never actually know if a mountain is truly unclimbed. But if there is no trace and there's no record, there's a good likelihood.
Sounds like a detective's work, like the Himalayan Sherlock Holmes. I think that there is a child dream in all of us to stand somewhere no human has ever been. But please take us there. What actually happens to you, and how does it feel to stand on the summit where no one else, most likely, most certainly, have never ever been?
Gosh, it's really that realization is more about the process on the way that I really enjoy. Like, I really enjoy the investigation, like you're talking about, of trying to sort out if something's unclimbed, and then next how to actually get to it. Sometimes that's the crux, like how do you access it? So oftentimes we go talk to Sherpas or shepherds, and Sherpa in northeastern Nepal, and also in the Kanchenjunga region, and then shepherds as well, who know the valleys best. So they know how to get up into potentially putting a base camp somewhere, but you don't oftentimes you just have a photograph from a journal. Google Earth isn't the best resolution in rural parts of the greater ranges of the planet. So oftentimes what looks like a scree field may be a talus field or something like that. So you really are, you have to plan with a few days of buffer to figure out those things, to figure out, maybe you have to reroute your climbing line you have planned, or reroute where your base camp's going to be. So there are a few things to sorting that out and figuring it out.
I can really sympathize with that, the process part of the journey, because I maintain that the real reason for climbing lays somewhere between the base and the summit of a mountain. The summit is a bonus. Unless you're not willing to pull the weight and do the work, you shouldn't be climbing at all. We're really not into the business of topping or summiting. We're in the business of climbing, and that pursuit, I think, is the drama, the romanticism. That's what it all is about. And I'd like to take this step further when it comes to doubt, myth, and history. And I'd like to hear your take on it. I mean, every explorer eventually meets skepticism, and let's take the ultimate example. Do you believe Everest may have been climbed before Hillary, perhaps even George Lee Mallory in 1924?
I am not sure. To look at the information available and what people have found and discovered in some of the reports, I think they originally planned to go across the North Face, Mallory Irvin, and they were last seen actually on the ridge. And the steps really are real climbing. Back in I believe it was the 20s, climbing 5'8" with nailed boots and the equipment they had at the time, and the mental. I think a lot of these things are mental barriers, like climbing harder grades, climbing at speed, things like that. And so that mental barrier wasn't passed yet. So it's possible that they likely didn't summit, but there's still a chance they did. So that would be my answer to that, because there's really it's not sure.
Let's dig into the craft of exploration a little bit further. Please help us and walk us through your inner journey, your process. When you identified a potential unclimbed peak, you said there might be Google Earth is one tool. How much satellite imagery do you use? Do you use old expedition reports? You mentioned the Alpine Journal. Is there even military maps? Is there even rumors that you use? How much do you use, for instance, Tourist Ministry of Nepal and other types of resources? And to what point does an idea become the real expedition? Is it, okay, maybe someone been there before, therefore it's out of the question, or you have almost definite proof that no one been there, then you go there? How do you sort those aspects?
Well, I think all of the above, what you just mentioned. So using each of those tools to try to decipher and sort out is something actually unclimbed. So yeah, the Alpine journals are a great place to start. And then from there, going into satellite imagery is good, Google Earth imagery, and then local knowledge, zooming in more and seeing that, we went to, let's see, a peak 2 years ago, and there was now a new access trail because of Urshigambu. Urshigambu is like it's like an energy, it's a mushroom with a caterpillar growing out of its head. And so it's picked, it's like the biggest cash crop in the Himalaya, and it's picked and sold to many people throughout the world for energy. And so they had made a new trail going up to close to this peak that helps us to access it. So having those, the local knowledge to figure out how to get up into an area can be huge as well. And so using all those tools and then going and seeing, because you really don't know until you stand on that summit if it's been unclimbed, if it is unclimbed, excuse me. So, you go up and check, are there cairns? Is there any sort of, physical trace of someone being there before? But sometimes people leave no trace. So it's really hard to say. Well, I think, most of the larger peaks have been climbed these days. And so there's smaller peaks around those that were oftentimes climbed for acclimatization for bigger peaks. And those weren't always reported. So sometimes an unclimbed peak may have seen an ascent, as acclimatization in previous years and decades. So.
In 2018, high above the Kumble Valley, we stood beneath a blade of stone few had ever noticed, Kangrishar, a 6811 meters ridge on the edge of Tibet. The mountain rejected us, rockfall forced us back, but retreat is never the end of the story, so we turned towards another unknown, Nierka, a 7,000 meter giant, and we traced a new line where no one had existed before.
Yeah, how are we doing?
Hey Fred, here we are, north face of Nierka.
Where are we?
We just climbed the north face of Nierka, and so we're on the ridge line here. You can see Chubu in the back here. Gaichun Kong, 15th highest on Earth.
There's a particular kind of reverence that emerges when you climb a mountain no one has climbed before. Not pride, not conquest, something quieter, a desire to leave as little trace as possible, to move through the landscape without disturbing it, and at the same time, an undeniable pull, a glimpse of what the pioneers must have felt, the first to stand somewhere, the first to see. But something has changed. We now have Google Earth, satellite imagery, high-resolution mapping of nearly every corner of the planet. We can study a mountain in 3D before we even touch it, watch summit videos in 360 degrees, read detailed trip reports explaining every step, every obstacle, every decision. And I maintain, something is lost in that. Because when everything is known, something essential disappears. With every inch discovered, the purity of exploration changes. Not disappears, but changes. The spirit of adventure becomes diluted. Not knowing, stepping into the unknown requires a completely different mindset, a different skill set, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, judgment without reference. You cannot download that. You cannot simulate that. You either live it or you don't. So the question becomes sharper. Are we explorers or are we consumers of experience?
I've came across a study that suggests that only 3 to 4% of Earth remains ecologically intact. Here's the question. At what point does exploration become intrusion? Should we leave some mountains alone?
I think historically expeditions have always been for some sort of scientific purpose or for to document. There was a more than just a summit that was sought out. So I do think those style and focus of expeditions are important for to understand more for science. So I don't necessarily think that all areas of Earth should be, we need some areas, of course, for wilderness. We need wild space. We need places for community, for alpine pursuits. Places like Chamonix or Whistler or Aspen or Interlaken or Innsbruck. So it's important to have developed areas. So skiing community develops, climbing community develops, and from there it goes off into alpinism and ski alpinism and these activities that we pursue. The reason why they exist is because of those communities. So I don't think we should be leaving, all areas of Earth alone. But I've felt in some places that maybe we didn't belong there. Like in Antarctica, at times you see these, penguin colonies thriving. You see animals thriving there, and we have all this infrastructure to support life there while they're pursuing skiing or climbing or other activities. And it kind of felt like maybe some areas we went to should be left alone. So completely closed or closed for periods of time. It's like if you look at Stoke Congaree, which is a very popular 6,000 meter peak in northern India, it was closed about 5 years ago because of overuse. And so you allow the land to heal, for things to grow back and for wildlife to a sanctuary of sorts. And so similarly with like Nanda Devi, they're talking about reopening Nanda Devi now and what that would do to the sanctuary there. So there's a few ways to look at that for sure.
Let's try to push this thought to the outer limits. Let's say that we jump several generations into the future, and we come to a place where we are 10 billion people on the planet, and half of them are alpinists. I'm just kidding. But there's a growing interest in climbing, and everyone wants to be first. What happens when there are no unclimbed peaks left? Does exploration end, or does it change form?
I think it changes form. We look at things through new lenses. It's like we're still looking at, speed now, climbing peaks in single push from base camp to the summit, or fastest known times, or more technical routes. So I think once summits are achieved, there's other pursuits that are going on that are very interesting physiologically to see what we can do, how fast we can go and what we can, like you did last year, your project. These types of things are pushing, challenge and what we can do.
You mentioned something earlier on that leave no trace. And studies shown that we're more prone to pick up and take our trash with us if we enter a pristine area. What is your strategy and what is your custom when it comes to unclimbed peaks? Do you practice the same kind of routines as on Denali National Park, where you actually take a poo in a canister and carry it out and to an incinerator, or how does it work?
Yes. So we, similar to like you would use in Denali National Park. So pack it in, pack it out, burn waste that we aren't able to get out. So things like that. So essentially burning waste and burying it seems to be the current practice. That they have put incinerators in some parts of the Himalaya for waste, which is great. But really burying it and burning it is the current strategy for the remote Himalaya.
Think about perspective and scale for a bit. As a child, for me, the world felt infinite. But after traveling to every single continent, 92 countries so far, to remote regions, and you've been all over. You've had the luxury and the privilege to visit some unbelievable places on Earth. The images that you display on your social media are nothing less than breathtaking. And you guys who listen and watch this video, please go and check out, like, and subscribe to Luke. It is just wow. It's mind-boggling. But you, Luke, after all this traveling, discovering the world, does the Earth feel smaller to you now?
No, it's massive and incredibly diverse. And there's so much more out there. Yeah, I haven't even scratched the surface. It's just so vast. And yeah, that's how it feels.
You're not slowing down, in other words.
I think the lens is changing a bit. There's, interests I've always had that I'm focusing on more. So, but I'll have 6 or 7 expeditions this year. So still going. I think it just evolves naturally. I start to pursue different interests as I go. So let's see.
Can you envision yourself being 70 and still pushing the envelope?
That's the goal. I don't know about pushing the envelope, but here in the Tetons, like many alpine places, there's folks in their 60s and 70s that are still out pursuing and skiing and climbing and having fun. So yeah,
Love
that's
it.
the goal. Yeah, long game.
Speaking of sacred mountains and meaning, in Bhutan, which you're familiar with, have you been to Bhutan, by the way?
I've not. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about Bhutan. People who are not acquainted with this sacred place, they have the Gross National Happiness product, but mountains there are protected by belief. They are sacred and therefore untouched. Do we need more of that in the world, you think? Not regulation, but reverence.
I think, reverence is pretty important and I think it comes organically just by going out and having a mountain experience, going for a hike, getting out into the natural world. It's something that we all value and appreciate. So I think that really comes naturally, and I think that it still is going on. It's like, even though there are permits available in the Himalaya, in not the Bhutanese Himalaya, but in India or in Nepal or Pakistan, a mountain can be available with a permit, but locally they won't allow you to climb it, because it's still considered a holy mountain, and so it's the home of the gods, and so summiting is not an option, which I respect and I think is great. So, or you can climb it, but you can't actually stand on the summit. So that's still going on in many valleys, and that belief system is still strong. So, yeah.
The third highest mountain in the world, Kanchenjunga in Nepal, many practice turning around a couple of meters from the summit because it's a sacred mountain for the believers. Is that something you've done, that you have avoided being on the very, very top and just been satisfied with being a meter or two away from the actual true summit?
It's pretty important, and I've always respected local custom. It's like we were in Mustang. Mustang is in central Nepal, and we were not allowed. This was in 2012, and we were not allowed to go into the mountains until the harvest was finished in the village, because 400 and something years before, they had in their books in the monastery that someone had gone into the mountains before harvest, and all the harvest was lost. So they don't allow people to do that anymore, and so we stayed and finished the harvest with them in the village and before going out to climb this mountain. So same with summits. If that's the local custom, we respect it for sure.
Let's talk about current work in the future. You have an ongoing project called the Himalayan 500 project. What is it, and how far into the project are you?
The Himalaya 500 is a ski project that started in 2010. It's to ski 500 ski lines in the Himalaya, which I was saying was about 2,500 kilometers long. It is a sizable project. I'm more than halfway done, but I'm not really trying to hurry through it. I think it's pretty important to highlight all the pieces of the range. Some areas I'm not able to get into because of permitting yet. So from decade to decade, that changes. So you really have to be present to win. So it will open up. Like I mentioned, Nanda Devi may open up in the next couple of years again, which will be huge because it's been closed for 40 years. So there's pieces of the range that take time to get into. And then each expedition takes a lot of planning and time to go out and do. But that's the purpose of the project as a whole, is just to highlight the diversity in natural history and culture and geology and snow climates along the whole range. It's just so vast. And so that's the purpose of it. And that's what the Himalaya 500 is.
If you have your heart somewhere in this world. And perhaps this is perhaps too intimate, and we don't want to debunk your absolute sweet spots. So there will be a herd of people venturing there. But if you could say, where does your heart belong? Is it somewhere in the Himalayas? If you could only have one more place to visit, where does your heart belong?
I would say it's really wherever I'm pursuing at the moment. I know that sounds kind of hippie, but the world is vast and so diverse, and so I've really started to pursue in the Andes as well of South America, also the Tian Shan of Central Asia for unclimbed and unskied projects, because I would. It's really the Himalaya continue to speak to me the most, so I'll continue to go back there most of the year, but also the Andes and the Tian Shan as well. So I would say check out the greater ranges of the planet. That's what I would recommend.
How many days of year are you on expedition?
It's about, I'd say about half of the year currently.
And the rest of the year, you are working, administrative work, strength training,
Yes.
cardio, sponsors,
Exactly.
pictures, video, getting, trying to market and trying to get customers for your upcoming expeditions.
Exactly. So, I do run Himalaya Alpine Guides, and we've started Alpine South and Alpine Central, which is just the trips we're doing in the Andes and in Tian Shan and in Mongolia as well. So it's working, doing administrative for that, for other guides, and also plans for myself. And then in between that, training and preparing for personal projects.
So where are you going next?
Where am I going next? I will be in Nepal, Himalaya this spring. So we're going to go and ski a peak in the Narfu region. So that's the start. And from there, I'll go into the Indian Himalaya and then the Pakistan Karakoram for some, there's 3 or 4 8,000 meter projects this year, and skiing at 6,000 and 7,000 meter elevation during the summer as well.
Luke, we could sit here for ages. I think perhaps we will have, not perhaps, indeed, we will have, we have to have a recap in the future soon, and we have to meet because there's so much to talk about. But if people want to follow your journey or understand your work, where should they turn to?
You can check out Himalaya Alpine Guides for the Himalaya and Karakoram. Alpine South is for the Andes. Alpine Central is for Central Asia, so Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. And my name for social media is where I post updates.
So what should we do? Should we ban climbers from certain mountains? After all, Bhutan has already done it. Climbing is forbidden, not because it's too dangerous, but because the mountains are sacred. And perhaps that forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Just because we can go somewhere, does that mean we should? Would preserving some mountains fuel our imagination? Would existence of the unknown keep something alive in us? Or are we by nature expanders? A species that pushes outward across continents, across oceans, and eventually into space. If every mountain is climbed, if every route is documented, if every corner of Earth is known, what happens then? Do we become richer or poorer? Because the unknown does something to us. It pulls us forward. It forces us to imagine. And imagination is not just entertaining, it is fuel. So, should we leave some mountains unclimbed? I don't have a definite answer. And maybe that's the point. Because exploration without reflection becomes exploitation. But restraint without curiosity becomes stagnation. And somewhere between those two is where we need to stand. The mountains don't need us. They don't care if we climb them. But we should care, because how we treat the last untouched places on Earth says something fundamental about who we are becoming. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps us asking the question that prevents us from sleepwalking into the future. See you soon.